My name is Juliana Nykolaiszyn with the Oklahoma State University Library. Today is August 9th, 2014, and we're in Vinita, Oklahoma to interview Attucks School alumni. With us is Okla Hicks. Thank you for joining us today, Okla.
You're welcome.
Well, Okla, let's learn a little bit more about you. Could you tell me the year you were born and where you were born?
I was born in 1935 in Murphy, Oklahoma.
And tell me a little bit about your parents.
Well, my parents, my dad, he was always, he worked at the powder plant back in the early. He was mostly a farmer with his dad, which was my grandfather in Murphy. My mother, all she did was just stayed home and maintained the home and took care of us children. You know, she never worked out any while we lived in Murphy before we moved here in 45 in Vinita. And so anyhow, in 45 we moved from there to Vinita because my oldest sister, she missed one school, a high school, because our school just in Murphy was one little one-room country school. All 8 grades went there, so when she finished 8th grade, she was out of school a year until we moved here in Vinita, and she started her 9th grade at Attucks High School, and then we followed behind her. You know, my oldest brother that was under her, he didn't finish school because he didn't like Mr. Ryan. Mr. Ryan was going to force him to take the initiation and play his basketball. So Wendy, we called him, he just dropped out of school. So years later, he went in service. This was back in the early 50s. And then, let's see, my oldest sister, she graduated from Attucks. Carlene, the next third oldest, she graduated. And I had a sister older than I caught up with her in, she wouldn't study. So she'd wait, I did domestic work in different families' homes here in Vinita. And she would take and copy all of my lessons I'd get during the recesses and breaks between classes. And so I caught on to her. She would copy word for word, and the teacher would get after, and she said, "Now, I know you two are sisters, but you don't have the same brain wave, you know." So I started taking my schoolwork to my jobs that I worked for white ladies all out in the west part of town, you know, and whatever. So anyhow, and she failed one year in school, so that made her catch up with me in high school in the 10th grade, I believe it was. So then the guy she was going with got her pregnant. But she stayed in and finished the 10th grade, and she never did come back. And Mr. Blau, principal, tried to get her after the baby was born to come back and finish her other 2 years, but she didn't, you know. So that's about my high school, and then I went on and graduated in 1953 with my class from, and then I got married to this guy that I had gone with. He was a little older than I was, but I fell in love. I guess the love bug got me or something. So after I graduated in May of '53, we got married in June the 28th, a year after I graduated, and moved to Wichita, Kansas. And 2 months later, we started our family. You know, so we had 2 boys and 3 girls. So, and we stayed there, and then we moved back in 50-something from Wichita, and this is where I've been since. Well, then we moved from here to Tulsa because he got on at McDonnell Douglas over there, and I was working, and I told him, I said, "You just stay in Tulsa on your job, and the kids and I will make it, you know." So no, nothing to do with him that moved us to Tulsa, which I didn't didn't really care about it, so I went over there and I knew this friend, longtime friend of ours. She worked for this couple that was real rich. And I was there 2 weeks, and she came by the house wanting to know if I was interested in getting a job, you know. Just been in Tulsa 2 weeks. And so I said, yeah. I said, I've always worked, you know, after my children got up big, you know, big enough that I could hire a babysitter. So I took that job, and they was rich as, I don't know what, had a lot of money. And so I went out for an interview, and the lady, Mrs., whatever her name was, I forget. But anyhow, she hired me, you know. And she had another black lady there that did the laundry and everything and cleaned the house. So all I was to do was to cook their meals, you know. And then they was Bryce's, Marion and John Bryce, it came to me. So they was socialites. They'd have these big parties with all their friends, and I'd have to stay in the evening to help the caterers and stuff serve the food, and she had bartenders and everything, and so I'd go around with my little white apron and serve the hors d'oeuvres in the big rec room that they had and everything. So I stayed with them for it was 77 to way up in the 80s, I guess. And so anyhow, during the time, she got real sick. And her husband took all of them to Hawaii when he knew that she didn't have long to live. So then when they got back, she got real sick, and I wasn't working for them then. I was doing some other kind of work. I think I started at it had to do something with the state. I was what you call weatherization. Yeah, weatherization department. I applied. I had moved back here to Vinita and stayed with my mother and dad. Then I went home for Christmas or something, spend with my kids that were still in Tulsa. And so I was offered this secretary job. Thank God I knew how to type and keep and everything. So I made up the guy that was over the weatherization sent Bobby, my oldest son, to the department and got me an application. And I filled it out, and then I came back to Vinita and got my clothes that I left, you know, and went back to Tulsa and got hired. So I worked there, I guess just short of a year, I think. And then I came down with, what was it? I had to go in the hospital, and I had what's called kidney stones. So I had to go in the hospital a little before I almost had my whole year in at the weatherization. So when I got back, I was able to go back, and then also I was working in the janitorial service at the big Williams company. And a good friend of mine that we became real good friends and still good friends, she got me hired at Williams Company in the janitorial service. So anyhow, that's about the size of that. And then here comes the divorce. My husband had just got tired of being married, and he wanted his free life again, so I told him, go at it, you know. So we had just moved, had a couple that belonged to our church, had built us a brand new brick home. 3-bedroom and real nice and everything. So he stayed there until, I got sick or something, and it was awful work. And my doctor told me that I was to be just practically by myself, you know, to get through what I was going through with. I couldn't get out what my ailment was. Oh, I came down with bronchopneumonia and almost died until my 2 younger daughters put me in the car and took me to our doctor, just a block over from where we stayed. And so he told me, he said, I don't want you to lift a finger. He said, you just almost at the point of death, you know. And this was all due because I'd stay up late at night and trying to get the new home in order and get the kids, you know, all ready for school the next day. So anyhow, I made my husband sleep under the van because I didn't want to be bothered, you know. So he didn't like that. So months went by. I got on my feet. My doctor dismissed me to go back to work for this Mr. and Miss Bryce. And so he decided he just about had enough. So he went and filed a divorce on me. So I got the papers. He took off of work. I remember I had a green and white Oldsmobile car. So I had the hood up and was checking my oil before I drove out the drive to go to work for the Bryces. So this black guy pulled up across the street, and as he was coming across the road to where I was in the driveway, he reached in his pocket and pulled out this long piece of white envelope-looking thing. But he had gone and got him a white attorney and filed divorce on me. And so these was the papers he was having served on me. You know, we hadn't talked divorce or nothing. So the black guy from downtown that served the divorce papers on me, he said, he just made a comment. He said, you don't need no man around the house. And I didn't catch on to what he said. And he said, are you Mrs. Okla Hicks? I said, yes, I am. I said, last time I checked, I said, I don't mean to be sarcastic or anything, but I am. So he said, well, I have some divorce papers to serve on you. And I said, some divorce or what? And he said, divorce papers. So my husband, at that time, he was in our bedroom looking out of the red drapes that I had up to our bedroom, and watched the man hand me this divorce papers, you know. So I thanked the guy for it and for the paper, and I knew what it was, you know. And he said, well, Miss Hicks, you have a good day. I said, I'll try. So he went on, got in his car. So I opened my car door and put this white piece of paper in my pocketbook and backed out. And so I got off work that evening, and he didn't say nothing to me. And me big mouth, I said, you tired of me and your family, huh? And I said, what brought this on? He didn't give me no answer or something. And I told him, I said, I'll fix you. So I called an attorney. I said, I'm not going to let him get away with it. So I called my friend that we all went to church, same church, Sella Campbell, and she and her husband had gotten divorced, but 6 months later they remarried. So I called her on her job. She worked out in Utica Square. And so I said, Sella, I said, I know you've been through a divorce. I said, I'm getting ready to go through one. And she almost came through the phone. She said, she said, what's going on? And I said, girl, you're not going to believe what I'm getting ready to tell you. I said, I was served divorce papers yesterday. And she said, everybody at church thought you all was just the ideal couple with them pretty children. And I said, girl, you just don't know what goes on in other people's homes, you know. Yeah, he was ushering every Sunday in church. And I was singing in the choir, and the kids was involved with the youth, you know, there at the church and everything. I thought it was, you know, but he had been planning this and everything. So what really did it, one day I had got in my car, backing out of the garage to go to work. And as I was going to work, this lady pulled up in my driveway. So something told me to go, but he had taken off of work. And something told me to keep on driving and go on to work, because I heard word that she had killed her husband. And I said, no, I'm not going to tangle with this sister. I said, whatever she want in my house, my husband, she can have it, you know. So I just kept on driving, went on to work, came in that evening. He was there trying to cook some supper for the kids. And still did. It was days before I said anything to him. And so finally I got the nerve. I said, oh, so you want out of your family? Next thing I knew, he'd served, well, this was a different place, but he was the one that filed for it, went and got him a white attorney and filed divorce on me. So that's the end of that story. After 20-some years of marriage and 5 kids, you know. So I said, well, I'm going to give you what you want, you know. So then he called himself coming back. He wasn't supposed to come on the property and anything. I had to call my attorney several times to get a restraining order on him, you know. But he did come back, and I had a big 8x10 picture of me that I had when we lived here in Vinita. He came over while I was at work and took this picture of me, and so I called my attorney and I told him, I said, I've got some things missing from my house. I said, he's not supposed to come to the house unless I'm there, you know. So my attorney called him, contacted him, told him, so I'll give you 24 hours to get her picture back where you got it from. So he bought it back. I thought maybe it'd be all the glass be broken and everything. So that was the end of that. So then he started going with other women, and we hadn't even got really divorced. My lawyer just made him pack his little stuff and leave. So then one night, it was about a year, I had this real good friend, and we still good friends today there in Tulsa. And she said, okay, she said, you need to get out of this house and enjoy yourself. So it was a year before I'd go. I wouldn't go nowhere to work and to church and Sunday school with my kids, you know. And so we went to this club, drove up, backed my car in. I remember I had a green and white Cutlass Supreme Oldsmobile, and backed in, and just so happened the owner of the club was standing in the door when my husband, almost to be a divorced husband, he pulled up in front of my car and blocked me in and came around to my side, but I had the windows rolled up, just cracked a little bit. And the first thing that popped in my mind that he had a gun. And so the owner of the club was standing in the door and ordered him to get off of his property. So he still was trying to figure out some way to get to me through my rolled up window. So the owner of the club told him, says, I'm going to tell you one more time, else I'm going to leave you laying right where you standing, you know, because most of those club owners and stuff carries guns, you know, for protection and safety. So he got in his car and left. So I told Dorothy, I said, well, we're not going in the club because he'll probably come back. She said, oh, no, the owner said, I know him. He's not going to let him in his club after he done ordered him off his property. So we went way out. The club was on Virgin. We went way out north part of town to a friend of my friend and her friend to use the telephone. So we got out and I went in and asked if I could use a phone. So I called the police, and I figured he had gone back over to the house, which when the police came, he asked me where I was. I told him, and I said, I'm out here with a friend of mine off at 36th Street North. He said, how long will it take you to get to your home? And I said, oh, about 5 minutes. So when me and my friend drove up there, there was 3 police cars with 2 policemen. he done run off in the ditch on the side of our house, you know. And so the police ordered him to take him, you know, get that car out of that ditch and leave, and he said he didn't want to get another call from me that he's back over there harassing me or bothering me anywhere I was. So I didn't be bothered with him for a long time, but he would come while I was at work, you know, to see the kids, which was fine. I said, he just better not harm any of them, you know. So that's the end of that. So finally, I went and cross-filed, got me a white attorney, and cross-filed divorce for him, and got the children, got the new home, and naturally I had my new car and everything, you know. So he just went on about his merry way, and he was out there partying, good timing with the younger generation and everything. So I told him, I said, this is what you wanted, so this is what you're going to get. So that was that. So anyhow, me and the kids, one by one, as they got grown, they, you know, left home, and just left me and the two young girls, my two youngest daughters. But we made it. And then finally, I got in sort of financial bind, and I let the house go back, you know. And then I moved back here to Vinita and stayed with my mother and dad.
What year did you move back?
It was in 70, I think it was 80.
Okay.
And I stayed with them, and that's how I started off. Where did I start? I think I went to Eastern State. I had another job. I went to Eastern State and got hired out there and worked quite a while, and then I worked for private, well, I went off into nursing, that's what it was, private duty nursing. Mm-hmm.
Well, let me take you way back. So you were about 10 when you moved to Vinita.
Mm-hmm. I was 1 month short. We moved, I think, in August, September. I was about 2 months short of being 10 years old.
Tell me about the house you moved to.
Oh, you don't want to know. The only thing available, it was on the same street that my mother, sister Nellie, Aunt Nellie, lived on 3rd Street. She lived on a corner house, and we would come up to visit her, and we saw this old tin. It was tin, old rusty tin. It was two rooms, a which should have been a living room. That was a bedroom, and they had another bedroom. Then you went out on the porch and had a little kitchen. There was, let's see, mother had how many children of us? Let's see, when we moved to Vinita, I think Pat, the baby girl of all 11, there was 11 of us, 8 girls and 3 boys.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And we all stayed in this little tin house. Yeah, Pat was born during that time when we moved to Vinita.
Would you share a room?
I'll tell you, Mother and Dad had their bed, and Pat, the baby, came along. She slept with them. Mother had a let-out divan in the front room. That's where the 2 brothers slept. Wendy and Charles, the 2 oldest brothers. They let this divan out. They slept on that. There was 2 beds, 3 beds back in the, it's just like it said, it was just a 3-room with all of us. And Mother had 3 beds back there, and the girls, it was 8 of us girls. She would take and separate some of us. Some would sleep at the head, some would sleep. Oh, it was hard. We had a good life in Murphy before we moved. We had everything, food, big homes, and everything, plenty cows, plenty vegetables, because my grandfather, he was a farmer, you know. But we stayed there in that little crowded house. But we made it. Mother had no electricity, had to burn coal oil lamps. And So finally, Mr. George Thomas stayed in a white house next to this old tin house that we moved in when we came from Murphy. He moved back to Salisaw or somewhere, and that house was available. So Mother and Dad got in touch with whoever he was buying it from or renting from, and we moved in it, but it was a nice living room, a 2-bedroom, and a kitchen, and we didn't have any running water inside. And so we managed, and by that time I think the oldest sister, Yvonne, had gotten married. And then Carlene, the second oldest sister, Wendell, the oldest brother, he had gone into service. So that was lessening the crowd, you know. And so anyhow, that left, Wendy went into service. Carlene, when she graduated, she went to California and stayed a while with my mother's sister, Aunt Hazel. So that was 1, 2, 3. So that left from Martha, me, the oldest, on down to the littlest, which was Patricia, the baby girl of the 11. There's 8 girls and 3 boys.
Still a lot in the house.
So still a lot in the house. This was the White House. But it had outside hydrant, you know, no running water. Mother had, for the cook stove, she had to put coal oil or something in it, which was dangerous. And I think one time it exploded on her, and just so happened she didn't get burned, you know. But by that time, I was working out, you know, in white people's homes and going babysitting and taking care of the grandchildren or their children, something while they work. So I started when I was in the 7th grade working out.
Well, and I don't think you've said it on tape yet, but what was your father doing during that time? And
my dad was a bartender at the club east of Vinita out on 66. He was a bartender for Clasby, had a big club, and then soon after that, Mr. Clasby made a big dance thing outside where he would have live bands to come up. Ernie Fields, I know you probably heard Ernie Fields Sr. had a big band back in those days, and he'd come up there and we'd get my oldest sister's boyfriends. We'd jump in their cars and we'd go out there and park and get up on top of the car so we could see over this thing that Mr. Clasby, where the bands would play out, you know, on the side of the club. And we'd just be out there just dancing and having a good time. So anyhow, that was the story of my dad. And then on Sundays, Dad would always take Martha, my sister that I'm under. She lives in Midwest City now. And so take us out there to help, you know, clean up the club after they done had their big, you know, Saturday night. So we'd go out there and he'd bring us back to town for us to get ready to go to Sunday school and church. So it was some kind of life.
How would you get to Attucks School?
We walked because we just stayed. Attucks is on 4th Street, and we always stayed on 3rd Street, just a block over.
Oh, so that was
we walked.
close.
Snow in the winter, snow up to here. It was real close, and we was real lucky to get that close because a lot of the other children lived way out in the north part. They had to walk, you know, back in those days. The children in school, not like they are now. They had cars and stuff, but none of the high school, you know, had any cars. They had to walk all the way from North End to Attucks. And we were just so lucky to just have a block, say, you know, just school was just right over on 4th Street. Yeah.
So describe the school for me. What was it like?
It was, it was nice, and then just in recent years, they renovated it. They've done they put a new ceiling in the gymnasium, and did the floor over. We had our last school reunion in another year. I think we'll have our we started out every 4 years, and then we started a lot of Attucks alumni was passing away, so we decided to have it every 2 years. So let's see, it's another year next summer, not this and this. In 2015 we'll have our next one, which will be 2 years. And we had nice teachers. I liked all of my teachers.
Well, tell me about some of the teachers you remember.
I remember all of them. Mr. S.A. Bly was the principal. Mr. Lewis Ryan, he was the basketball coach, and he taught senior level. I went to him my junior year, and I didn't like him, so I didn't go back my senior year, graduation. So we had Mr. Ryan, he was the coach. He was the science and history teacher. Mr. Bly was the homeroom. He was downstairs. But we had study periods, and then we had algebra and geometry under him. And that's all he taught. We had Miss Armstead, she was our English literature teacher. We had a home economics where we learned how to cook and sew. Let's see, we had a music teacher. We had several of them that would come and go, And let's see, who else? Let me see. That was about all of the teachers there at, one time. They would just, like when school would start in September, we probably didn't have the same teacher or teachers that we had the year before. And let's see, we had a Miss Ford out of Wagner. That's when we had typing, bookkeeping, and shorthand, and the students, we wasn't catching on to shorthand, so they, they stopped the shorthand in her class. But she was a good teacher. I think you'd call commercial or something. But anyhow, I took typing, bookkeeping under, and then my senior year, I didn't want to go back into Mr. Ryan after I done blessed him out. So I took a second year of typing. So that was, and then we had I'm glad you asked. We had a girls' glee club. I'm glad you asked. And we, the girls, all of them, they were the music teacher. She would choose the best ones that could sing, and I was one of the group, and I guess it must have been about 8 or 10 of us that she chose out of the music department. And do you know, we would walk from Attucks, this is the girls' glee club, to way different parts, to the white ladies that was having their teas or something. We would walk from Attucks School all out in the West End, wherever we would be invited, and we would just be practicing our songs as we were singing, and people would be coming out, looking out their doors, and hear us, hear all this singing, and we'd be practicing our songs between the school and the ladies, whoever we was going to sing. And that was real fun. It was fun. And sometimes we'd get we'd be caught by the train, the track, and we'd just be singing our little hearts out of town, going to sing for these ladies' teas and stuff like that. So that was really something. So anyhow.
Well, you were in Glee Club. Were you in any other clubs or activities?
No, we had we had a basketball. The girls, high school girls, played the Alumni. The old ladies that had families, and I remember the Rhines, and they got together. The Alumni would play us, and we'd just beat the socks off of them. Some of them had just had babies, and they'd be out there with no bras on, and they just flopping, you know. But we'd beat their socks off, and they'd get so mad because we'd beat them so bad. And that was just for, you know, just to do something. But the high school girls, let's see, who was Eva Thomas, and my sister Martha and I, we was about the three best basketball players on the high school girls team. And Mr. Ryan, the one I'm talking about, and Dwayne Willis, and James Lloyd Bullock, they was referees. And they would get the cheating for the Alumni ladies, you know. And they would cheat, and boy, I tell you, I had one little girl, Eva Thomas, and her sister, she and her sister Marva, we graduated together in '53. But she's in a senior citizen home, her sister. But Eva, she didn't take no stuff. She would fight them old women out there, and they'd get into it, and the referees would have to come between them and everything, but we just looked forward to beating them old Alumni women's socks off. And they'd just be out there just panting and blowing and everything. So that's we didn't play basketball with any other districts that was in our district, you know. Some of the high schools out of town, they had girl basketball, so we formed our own, played them old women in Vinita. So it was a lot of fun. We just looked forward to beating them, and they just get so mad. And as I said, the coaches was, Dwayne Willis was the coach of Jerry and Lila B. Dwayne was married to Lila B. Dwayne Willis was married to Jerry Willis. And no, they would just cheat and everything. We'd just be fussing and almost coming to blows and everything. So that was a good experience.
Would you have proms or dances?
Oh yeah, so we'd have a junior and senior prom. And live bands. We had you couldn't attend unless you was a junior or senior. The lower grades, 9th and 10th, they wasn't allowed to come, you know. They could come and stand around the gym and listen to the band and watch us dance and stuff, but they wasn't allowed until they became juniors and seniors. Yeah, we had proms. We'd decorate, get the big ladders, and the boys would get up there and decorate with crepe paper and everything, and the stage where the band would be playing. And then we would be invited to different schools in our districts, you know, to their proms and their basketball tournaments. So it was fun. Fun. Enjoy it.
Do you remember any other school employees outside of teachers and the principal? Like the janitor or?
Oh yeah, there was Mr. Isaac Bean. When we moved to Vinita in '45, he was the janitor. And they said, I think that was during the time that he was going blind, but he was a barber. And they said he didn't have no sight, but he would cut hair in his home and everything. And then, what else? Let's see, back up. You asked me, what was the question?
Janitor.
Janitor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Mr. Houston Landrum, when we first moved to Vinita, he was the janitor. And then on down through the years, Edgar West, my cousin, He was the janitor. Yeah, we always had someone associated with the school as janitors. Edgar, he's my second cousin. He's deceased. So is Mr. Houston Landrum, and Mr. Ike Bean. Yeah, we always had a janitor.
Well, with working so much while you were in school, when did you have time for homework?
I would get my homework doing, like, we would always have a period, an hour in school, and instead of going out, on the playground or being with the other students, I'd stay in and take that hour. And sometimes during my lunch period, we just stayed from just on the block over from the school, and I would get my lessons. I'd go to the Mr. Bly's office, the principal office, any spare time I could, because I always, worked out in the west part of town after I got out of school.
And what would you do with the money you made?
Bought my clothes, bought my shoes and my clothes and stuff, and my sister, this Martha that I'm under, she would slip and get my nice dresses and stuff, and she was tomboyish. And she'd go wrestle and climb wire fences and stuff, and Mother wouldn't make her stay out of my clothes when I'd be on my jobs and stuff. Yeah, I worked after school from 7th grade all the way till I graduated in '53.
Tell me about discipline in school.
Oh, we had some tough teachers, so I was always on my good side. I never did. And everybody said, "Oh, you Mr. Bly's pet," and yeah, and you just all the teachers' pets. I said, "No, it's not, because I respect them for who they are, whether I'm 7th grade or 12th grade, and I do exactly what they ask of me to do, So I didn't have any problem with any of the teachers. Never was called in the office or anything.
What would happen to students who misbehaved?
Well, Mr. Bly, he had a paddle, and especially he didn't whip the girls with it, but he had a paddle that had holes in it. Oh, and I'd hate to see him whip them boys. He would grit them teeth and whip them so till they'd just be screaming, and that should have been outlawed from the school. I mean, it was a big, thick paddle with a big handle on it, and that was what he called discipline. If he thought they did something that they deserved it, which a lot of times I didn't think they deserved it, and especially down in Mr. Bly, the principal's room. And me and Marva, my best friend, we still keep in touch. She went to school in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, when we graduated, and did her 4 years up there. And then she got a teacher job when she moved to Los Angeles. And we talk quite often. And she's retired from teaching, but she had her oldest sister, and few of her brothers had moved in the LA area, and that's why when she finished college in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, she went out there and got a teacher job. So as a matter of fact, I just talked to her the other day, and we just talked like we back in high school, but we still friends. And then her sister Eva, she's in a senior citizen residential home out there, and it's out of 12 of the kids, she and her sister Eva, they're the only two left out of their family.
Well, looking back on your time at Attucks, are there any memories that just really stand out in your mind?
Oh, gee, there's a lot. Just like I say, it was fun. It was really fun because I was involved in, like, I remember, I don't know whether you remember Edgar West. Well, he was the janitor when I was in school. And it was one class, I forget now, I think it was his class. There was only, there was only 2 boys and 2 girls in his graduating class. And we always had the senior play just before school was out. Miss Armstead was a sponsor of the high school, the senior plays. So their class, they needed 1 more female to fill the cast. And they came way back down. I think I was 9th grade. Yeah, I was 9th grade and they was graduating, and chose me to play the part that they needed, another female. There was I was a freshman in high school, and they chose me out of all the girls in the 9th, 10th, and 11th. They chose me to play the part that they needed 1 more girl, and they played. And then, of course, I was in our senior play. I never will forget the name. It was Peekaboo Penny. And we would have so much fun. You see, it was 9 of us that graduated in my class in '53. Miss Armstead was our sponsor, you know. And we would have the best fun down there at night on the stage, rehearsing our parts and everything. And it was a Peekaboo Penny was the name of our senior play. And so we just crack up to Miss Armstead, just have to call a break for us to get ourselves together, because it was such a funny play anyhow, and the way some of the senior characters would portray it, you know, we just fall out laughing. We couldn't say another word. That was just stick in my mind. We had so much fun at night down there practicing for our senior play. And then when we graduated, whichever, the vow and the salutatorian and valedictorian, let's see, there's a cousin, Lafayette West was my second cousin. He was one, and then Marva Thomas that I'm speaking of, she was the next. So whichever one was the highest, they got that. And then I was, let's see, I did the history, yeah. The night of our graduation, I did the history of our class. I went way back when we was in grade school, all up until us graduated.
Where was graduation held at?
It was at the high school.
In the auditorium?
On the stage. Yeah, that's where we would march in during graduation. We'd have our cap and gowns on, and we'd march in from outside, you know, and the gymnasium would be just packed with people, you know, at graduations, all of them. And we would all sit out in the floor. And then I forget now who was Mr. Bly was our principal, but what was that's over all of the schools in the superintendent, yeah. He would always be there to give out our diplomas. And then they'd have all of us, all the seniors through all the classes, the years, sit out in the middle of the gymnasium floor. And as our name was called, we would get up and go, and the superintendent would hand us our diploma. And then we'd have to take our shawl, and put it over on this side or this side. I forget now which one. But yeah, we had nice, and we had to march in by a song that our music teacher was playing, you know, and everybody would stand up, and they'd be hollering and a screaming and a shouting and a clapping, and especially your family members, you know. So it was fun.
How was Attucks School regarded in the community? What did people think about it?
Oh, it was nice. We had a lot of, when we would put on fundraisers or something to take trips like to music festivals, which the invitations or the whatever, they would cooperate because we'd put on a lot of fundraisers, in order to take us by bus somewhere. I never will forget. We chartered a bus. Miss Ella Mae Harris out of Tulsa was our music director, teacher. And we went to Langston, Oklahoma for the National Music Festival. And we chartered this bus, but we all up until the day that we was to pull out in front of school and this busload of kids going to Langston for the music festival, we put on fundraisers to raise money, And then they would have a style show in between where they would have all of the choirs from the high schools combined to present, the music, the singing and everything. So this particular year, I only remember while I was in high school, we only went to Langston to the big music singing fest, choir. And they had a style show. And so we had home economic. We made clothes. And we started out making little aprons, and then we progressed to making dresses and skirts and stuff like that. So I remember I made this dress, and it had a little ballier top, to coincide with the print and stuff, flowers or whatever. So my home economic teacher, out of all of our home economics, they had a style show the year that we went to Langston for the music festival. But they had, for entertainment, was a style show. So she chose me, put my name in there to be on the style show in Langston. So I modeled and styled this two-piece dress at Langston, walked across stage with all the others, that was on the style show. So I was sort of a little popular girl, I guess you'd say. So I was always being chose to do something, special.
Well, you graduated before integration, and you were getting on with your life after you graduated. But when you learned that Attucks School was closing, how did it make you feel?
It was well, not only me, but it was sort of sad, because as I said, I was 5th grade when I started to school, and just to think that, the integration, well, it wasn't anything that we could do about it, it was to come sooner or later. But I tell everybody, I said, well, I had sisters, younger sisters, that was in the integration, that went to the Vinita High School. But I said, oh, I hope I hurry up and get out before all I hear about, they're going to integrate the schools. And I was just hoping that it wouldn't be the next year when school started or something. I don't know. I just had that in the back of my mind. I don't think I could adjust it well,
What was the community's response to the school closing?
It seemed like, well, Mr. Ryan, our science teacher, he went to the high school. He as a teacher. Mr. Bly, our principal, he was there. They closed Attucks for a while, and then when they opened up again, they made it like 1st grade. You remember that?
Yeah.
1st grade to 5th grade.
I think that's about right. 5th or 6th.
Yeah. And then I think they had some of the same teachers that was here to teach those grades. Well, I was gone. I was out of school and gone. And I thought it was nice for them to do that, but it didn't happen while I was there.
How do you think that your education at Attucks compared to a white student in Vinita?
How do I feel?
Do you think you got the same education? Better education?
You know, I had sisters and my brother Charles that moved back here a few years ago after 40 years in California. They all went from Helen, my sister that's under me. We were the last of the going to Attucks, and then they started integrating, and which meant the black students went to the white high school.
Right.
And they were in this group of integration, you know. But I didn't have it was okay with me, you know, because I was, when it happened, I guess I was out of school. Do you remember what?
You were out of school.
What year they integrated?
They integrated, I believe, in 58. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I came out in 53.
Yeah. But I mean, even in 53, you know, you were going to a segregated school. You had the white kids going to Vinita. Do you think your education was the same? You ever wonder about that or no?
Well, all I can say, we had some good teachers at Attucks. And if you didn't get what they was teaching, it wasn't nobody's fault but the students. And I graduated with a B+ average, you know, because I contributed that to me, not because after school I always went west part of town, worked for the white lady, you know, taking care of their children and cleaning their house and cooking their meals and stuff like that. So that took some time, and sometimes it would be dark before I'd leave the house to go home, which I walked to and fro, you know, way out in the west part of town. I remember snow and all. And my other sisters before me, my older sisters, they did the same thing. You know, we always got us a little job, and mother, she worked out, and that's how we got working in the white ladies' homes out here in west part of town, because mother said, well, I got some teenage daughters, you know, and she did. She worked out too, up until, you know, she was way up in age. And so we just followed. She'd get us work, and I remember I was 12 years old, and my dad worked at the Bob Clasby Club out here east of town on the hill. And mother got sick, and we found out later she was pregnant with Pat, the last baby girl. And so I would have, I'd get out of school at 4 o'clock, and the guy that I married, his uncle Cheese Irons, ran a taxi cab, and his nephew was running the cab. And he'd be there at the house when I'd walk from the school over on 3rd Street, and pick me up and take me out on the east of town at the Hilltop Cafe. And I was just 5th grade. And the waitresses out there, they would have me to stack pop box, wood, the pop came in, they'd be over there. And I'd be up on these boxes, because they had these old time, two what you call them, one for washing dishes and one for draining, and then the drain board. And I'd have to stand on these pop boxes, big wooden pop box that pop came in, so I could reach over and wash the dishes, and then switch over here and rinse them, put them on the drain board. And then I just stacked the dishes up, because the cooks, they had the shelves where they had all their steak platters and dishes and stuff. And I'd take my homework to school, and then between getting caught up with washing the dishes and scalding them and everything. I'd go over there and get my homework for the next day. It was tough, but I look back on it and I said, you know how in the world at 10 years old I did that. But I did, because my older sisters, they had jobs, you know, in town that they would go on. But they needed somebody bad to wash dishes and pots, and I did it at 10 years old.
What were some of the black businesses in town that you could remember?
Oh, let's see, there was George Venice Restaurant. There was black barbers that I think they didn't have any license to barber. Mr. Isaac Bean, he was partially blind. He cut hair. Mr. Blue, they had a beer joint across from Attucks Park. Are you familiar with the Attucks Park? Okay, it was across. Him and his wife owned a beer joint that they had a vendor in there, and they sold. He barbecued some of the best barbecue in town, and that's where everybody, you know, the young kids wasn't allowed in there because it was sort of a rough, you know, they would be fighting and we were still staying over on 3rd Street, and all at once you would hear, especially on Saturday nights, you would hear guns going off. It was rough. And no young kids underage was allowed in the place because it had a bad name, you know. So that was him and his wife. They owned the what's called Beer Tavern across from the Attucks Park. And so anyhow, Daddy used to hang out there, and like in the daytime, if we wanted pop or something, we would go over there and buy pop, you know, and go straight back home. That was before the crowd would start getting in the evening, you know. They used to have a real good baseball team, the black guys here in Vinita. Some of them were real good. Some of them could have become professionals if they would have, you know. And then they would play other black teams. They'd play the white baseball teams and park, the seats and stuff, or what you call it. Anyhow, they would just be full, and just far as the eye could see was just people like on a big game, you know. And I remember, I think a baseball team from Kansas City came, and boy, that park was just full of people. And we look forward to that because we'd go there, and the what's called would be full, so we just stand around, you know, and get a peek at them hitting the ball and stuff. But we had a real good black baseball team that they traveled different places and played, and other teams would come there and everything. So that was real for good entertainment.
What about doctors?
We had Dr. Sharp. He was, well, way back before we moved here, they had Dr. Ryan, black doctor. And the Ryan's Hotel, I don't know whether you heard of it, but it's right up the street and across on what's called, it's still standing. It was just a family, the Ryan Hotel, they called it. And so the old man was a doctor, and Dr. Sharp was a doctor when we moved to Vinita in 45. And had good practice and everything, delivered a lot of babies and everything. But the Ryan Hotel, they wanted to put that on the historical. Had you heard about that?
On the register?
But it's one of the great-great-grandsons living there, and he stays in his mother, Geraldine Willis. years ago, not too many years ago, she was staying in the south part of her bedroom. And this particular morning, I heard the sirens, and I said, "No, where is that? It's getting awful close." She had gotten up that morning and had a long nylon house coat. She had one of these little heaters, with the open, what you call it, had the grill,
Yeah.
And she got too close to that and set herself on fire.
Oh my goodness.
And by the time Giovanna, her baby girl, she was, Giovanna. It's not Giovanna. We call her Boo, but she's still working at the police department here. And she happened to be home. She didn't have to go to work that morning for some reason. And she saw this smoke. And I heard all of these fire trucks and ambulances and stuff, because I stayed just right down the street. And I couldn't imagine what was going on. And I got up and I said, "Let me go and open my door and see what's going on." So when all I saw is the ambulance had already came and got her. But then her daughter, Diane, and her daughter was walking across the vacant lot in front of me going towards the house. So I got my coat on and walked up there. It was real cold. And I got up there and I asked one of the firemen, I said, "What happened?" And she said, he said, "Did you know Geraldine Willis?" And I said, "Yes." I said, "I know." He said, "Well, see, she caught herself on fire and almost burned herself to death." So anyhow, they rushed to put in the ambulance. The ambulance came. I didn't see that. It had already happened by the time I went and opened my front door to look up the street. So my brother, Wendy, came by and he said, "What happened?" And I said, "I don't know." I said, "I went up there and I said, it's all about Jerry." I said, "I think the fireman told me that she got burnt real bad." And so anyhow, we stood out there and talked a while, and the fireman was still up there working, making out their report and everything. So they ended up taking her by ambulance, a helicopter or something, ambulance to Tulsa, to one of the hospitals there. She was burnt so bad. But she lived to that evening and died from the...
Wow.
So that build, is still standing, as I say. And one of the sons, Jerry and Dwayne Willis, his son's youngest son, he still, after the fire, the 2 rooms on the south side of the whole big, used to be Ryan's Hotel. That's where he stays, in those 2 rooms, and the others just, I'm surprised that the city, they said it's on the, historical
Wow.
thing. But they never did, pursue it anymore to put it on, the sole thing, because it was built way back in the 1800s or something like that, Historical Society.
Well, have you attended many of the Attucks reunions?
All of them. Yeah, I was one of the ones that started it back in 80. Well, I got to get my notes. I'm getting old, sister. I was the one that suggested to Leonard Heydrich and Charles Kirkendall, 2 of the sort of prominent black men around here. They came by my house where I'm still staying on 240 South 2nd Street. And I was out on my porch, and they stopped, and I walked out to the truck, And I said, Leonard and Charles, I said, you know, I've been thinking, I said, somebody's just got to start a school reunion. I said, it's just all these years, nobody talked about it. And so Leonard Hydrick, we graduated in '53 together. And he's still living. See, it's quite a few of us. I'm trying to think. You see, I know I just had to put my thinking cap on. But anyhow, it was 9 of us that graduated in '53 from Attucks. And so anyhow, I brought up about, you know, why don't we get together and have a meeting and try to pull off, get together, and as many of us can, and start our first high school reunion. So they both agreed, and they said, Okie, that's my nickname. Everybody called me Okie. Said, you get it started and we'll back you. So that's how it got started. So we called a meeting, Leonard and Charles Kirkendall and I. Leonard and I especially, because I work with him better than I do with Charles. And Charles tried to be too bossy and take rule of everything. So I got with Leonard and we set a date, and he called up to First National Bank and got the community room. And do you know, it was over 40 or 50 people at our first meeting.
Wow, that's a lot.
So I had made out the order of the procedures of how you go down, choosing the president, vice president, secretary, and all of the other, you know. So I presented that, I laid that on the table at the meeting up there, and Leonard, I told him, I said, Leonard, I said, you can take over, you know. I said, I done my part. I said, I've called everybody. I ran up my telephone bill, calling all the kids in Tulsa that went to school at Attucks, and just everybody I could think about. I just got on the phone. And it was over 40 some of us at the first meeting. So we organized it and got it to going, and then we had some other meetings, and we decided what month and what date. And it's still been going on ever since. So it was every 4 years. And then in the process, a lot of the Attucks graduates was passing away, you know. So we decided that after 1 or 2 every 4 years, we started every 2 years. So our next one will be in 2015. And I've never missed a one.
Well, looking back on your time at Attucks, what's one thing that you want people to remember about the school?
Well, it's still standing, you know, and a lot of them that comes back every 2 years for the reunion. We did have our registration down there in Mr. Bly's room that we call Prof's room on the, and then we, the gymnasium, they have done a lot of work in it, but we just had access for registration in Mr. Bly's room, which was over on the north, let's see, not north, the east side of what you call downstairs. And so it's just about the same, you know, and then when they integrated and changed it into, you know, the elementary part, it hasn't been too many times that, only times when we have a reunion that I get to go through and go upstairs, and a lot of the others that come for the reunion, they do the same thing, you know, just viewing what it looks like now when they were there years and years and years ago.
What do you hope people remember about you?
About me? Mm-hmm. I hope it's all nice. I hope it's all nice because, just like I say, I'm a kind person that where I see someone in need, if I'm financially able, I'll help them, you know. And I guess that'd be my legacy, you know.
Well, before we close out, tell me about your name.
My name?
Mm-hmm.
My name. As I said, I was named after my father's mother. Her name was Oklahoma, which apparently she was born way before Now, this is what the history that I've gotten about my name. She was born way before Oklahoma became a state. So I'm going to do some research, go to Tellicourt, that's where I think she was born, and find out if Oklahoma was named after my grandmother, my dad's mother, which her name was Oklahoma. Mm-hmm.
And they shortened it with you to Okla.
Okla, which they left O-K-L-A-M-A-E. So what did they, Okla, H-O. They left the A-H-O. And they dropped the M, A, and put the E there. Yeah. My dad's mother was named Oklahoma. And then, just like I say, I'm gonna try to find some research to see. She was full-blood Cherokee Indian. To see if Oklahoma was named after her before Oklahoma became a state.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to add before we let you get out of here today?
Got everything out of me. How in the world I remember all of that?
Well, thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it.